Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about vaccination, and only vaccination. There's a lot of other behaviours I might talk about, but I think it's pretty clear at this point that vaccination and the ongoing willingness to take COVID vaccines is going to matter. And the fundamental premise of my talk this afternoon, I guess, is that we can learn from this vaccine rollout that we've had during 2021 about what drives that decision, that willingness to get vaccinated, and that's going to help us to get that vaccination rate, which yes is high in Ireland, but potentially can help us get it even higher, and potentially can help us in the future, in the months and years to come, when it looks like COVID vaccines are going to be an important part of our defence on an ongoing basis. So that's what I'm going to talk about, and that's the assumption that underlies this talk. These are my guys. This is the Behavioural Research Unit at the ESRI. I put these up to remind me to say something about method, and also to thank them, because these people have worked incredibly hard over the last year and a half. And they're a mixture. They're a mixture of behavioural economists and psychologists, experimental psychologists. And I find when I'm talking to medics that often there are some, if you'll forgive me, quite strong misconceptions about what behavioural scientists do. And I think it's important when I get the opportunity to say a little bit more about the kind of methods we use and how we actually get the data and the insights that we get into people's decision-making and behaviour. So I'm going to say a little bit about that as we go through as well. I'm going to draw upon primarily a paper that we've recently published in Psychological Medicine, which was a study specifically on vaccine hesitancy. It's a diagnostic study where we were trying to understand vaccine hesitancy, but I'm also going to draw on what's called the social activity measure, which we undertake for the Department of the Taoiseach every 2 weeks and have done throughout 2021, which has been tracking people's uptake of the vaccine and is able to relate it to different kind of behavioural variables and socio-demographic variables and perceptions as well as we go along. And I'm going to say a bit about that at the end. Okay, on the method issue, I find usually that when I'm talking to people and I say I'm a behavioural scientist, they immediately assume that what we primarily do is look at surveys and that we ask people about opinions and attitudes. Now, we do a bit of that, but that primarily isn't how we gather our data, and I want to explain a little bit about how we do before I show you these findings on the vaccine. What we typically do actually is experiments. Very similar, in fact, to clinical trials. We randomize people to see information in different ways. We randomize people to see certain formats of information, certain presentations, and we look at what difference it makes to their decision-making, exactly as in a clinical trial, you might give one person one drug or no drug or a placebo, and you randomize them into these different groups, and you look at what the outcomes are. We do exactly the same with people's behavior and with their decision-making. And we don't just ask them what they might do or what they feel or what their attitudes are. What we actually do, to a very large extent, most of the studies that we run in the Behavioural Research Unit, is we use an interactive computerized environment. During normal times, we'd actually have people come into the lab and do this with us. But during this time, we've done almost all of it online. And what we essentially do is we kind of put people through their paces. So we give people things like ranking tasks, where we give them reasons for doing things or perceptions they have, and they have to rank them in terms of importance. Sometimes we measure things like risk perceptions using sliders that people can move along and are interactive. We give them trade-offs that they have to resolve, where they have to decide if one thing goes up and another goes down, where they place the trade-off. We give them multiple choice questions where we objectively test their understanding of the situation that they face, which has been particularly important, we think, during COVID. We give them different kind of data visualizations to see how well they understand those. We mock up websites to gauge responses, and sometimes we just give them open text responses, where we ask them what the first things that come to mind when they make a decision about a particular issue. So we use all of these interactive computerized methods, also randomizing people to see information in different ways, in order to put them through, if you like, their kind of cognitive paces, understand what they understand, how they reach decisions, how they go about it. So those are the kind of methods we use. And the vaccine study I'm primarily going to talk about is an example of using these methods to look at vaccine hesitancy. So this is the one that's published in Psychological Medicine, and if you're interested, it's an open access journal. You can simply get this study online. Okay. It set off with 6 research questions. The primary one was this: how are perceptions of risks, benefits, knowledge, or rationale associated with the intention to get vaccinated? We also asked, what are the main perceived benefits and risks of the COVID-19 vaccine? How do the perceived risks of the vaccine compare to other perceived risks? What do people know about the COVID-19 vaccine? And what rationales do people have for getting vaccinated? And finally, does the content of communication influence the intention to vaccinate? We embedded an experiment into this study as well. Now, I'm not going to talk about that because I don't have time. The ones I am going to talk about are the three that are bolded there, about how the perceptions of risks and benefits and people's knowledge were associated with the intention to get vaccinated, and what the main perceived benefits and risks of the vaccine are, and what people know about it. Those are the things I'm really going to talk about. Why? Because they turned out to be the things that really mattered. So let me explain that. We sent people through a multi-stage experimental task. It was a large representative sample of the Irish population. They went through multiple stages that randomized themselves in order, where we asked people to list the immediate things that came to mind, the risks and benefits of the vaccine that came to mind. We got them then, when we gave them a list of those risks and benefits, to rank them all according to which they thought were most important or which they thought would influence their decision the most. And we had them make a bunch of choices where they had to choose between what relative risks they were willing to make, to scale different rationales for getting the vaccine. And finally, we gave them an objective knowledge test about what they knew about the vaccine. So I'll show you what some of these things look like as we go through. This is a simple ranking task. So we give people reasons on the left and we say, right, we'd like you to rank these in terms of how important they are to you. So you can see there as fairly trivial things, or perhaps not trivial. I'm afraid of needles, rare serious side effects, we don't know long-term side effects, the type of vaccine is new, it's been developed quickly, and so on. We give people these reasons and we have them rank those reasons in an interactive environment where they can put things in and take them out, check their ranking, confirm they're happy with it, and so on. So this is the kind of methods that we sometimes use. Here's an example of a multiple choice knowledge question about the vaccine. So the question we're asking here is, COVID-19 vaccines have been developed more quickly than most vaccines. Why is this? And people can choose more answers, and they can choose and click and unclick and decide what they think is right. And here there's clearly a right answer as displayed and a not right answer. We can check how good is their knowledge of the vaccine itself. Here's another example of the kind of interactive environment we use, where we're getting people to rate different rationales that they might use for getting the vaccine. So this gives you an idea of the kind of interactive computerized methods that we use. Okay, so let's get on to some results. One of the most interesting things simply came from asking people to put into open text boxes what were the first things that came to mind when they listed risks or benefits of a COVID-19 vaccine. And one of the things that actually surprised us was that the benefits seem to matter in many ways more than the risks. So what I've done here is I've categorized in this chart the population into 4 groups, depending on their intention to get the vaccine. So on the left, you've got the people who are saying definitely no, I'm not going to get this vaccine. So this was done early in 2021, this study. And at that point, the vaccine rollout hadn't really got into full swing, and most of the people we're talking to, almost all of them, hadn't had the vaccine. And the ones who are saying the definite no are on the left there, and the ones who are saying the definite yes are on the right, and you can see the ones in between. And when we asked people to list the benefits and risks that they were considering about getting the vaccine, what we find is there's an enormous difference between whether people have a benefit that immediately comes to mind if they're going to say yes, and a benefit that immediately comes to mind if they're going to say no. And that effect actually turned out to be more strong than the effect when we ask people to list risks. We still see the same thing. You can still see that the people who are definitely going to get it are less likely to give risks, and the people who are definitely not going to get it are more likely to list risks. But it actually turned out the bigger difference between the people who are going to get the vaccine and the people who said they were not was whether they were actually likely to list benefits, whether the first things that came to mind when we asked them what were the first things that came to mind were benefits of getting the vaccine that they could put down. And that gave us a slight surprise to start with, but we discovered that would turn out to be a bit of a theme in this study. If we look here, and what you're seeing here is the output of a statistical model about what predicts vaccine hesitancy. So the green bars there are all the different benefits, where the taller that bar, the stronger the influence on that particular that particular benefit in terms of their likelihood of getting the vaccine. And the red ones are the negatives. They're the ones where, what are the risks that are most strongly linked to people saying they won't get the vaccine. And what you can see there is that it was really important that people could list those benefits. There's as much weight in those green bars overall as there is in the red bars. And particularly realizing the degree of protection that the vaccines were giving you from COVID-19 was a really important element of saying yes to the vaccine. But again, there was another surprise on the right. So there's two surprises here. One is that the benefits mattered as much as the risks, whereas all of the media attention was on risks and side effects, but actually not perceiving the benefits was mattering too. But on the right-hand side, one of the interesting things you can see there is actually, when we measured this with this statistical model and we looked at how people ranked the different risks, the speed of development turned out to be the thing that people were most worried about, that was most strongly related to vaccine hesitancy. The people who were not going to get the vaccine, what they were most worried about, what was most strongly linked to it, was the speed with which the vaccines had been developed, rather than risk of side effects that they might worry about. So we found that these results were not necessarily what you would expect reflected from the public debate in terms of what was going on in people's minds when they were thinking about this decision. This is the output of the objective knowledge test. And I'm not going to go through all of these questions. The questions are listed on the right-hand side there. But essentially, we asked people somewhere between 14 and 16 general knowledge questions about, depending how you count it, about the vaccines, how they've been developed, how they worked, what impacts they had, and so on. And we were very careful to make sure that all of those questions were framed in a very neutral way, were very factual, and were things that were definite and would be known by people who were paying attention. And what you can see there is the brown, the sort of reddy brown on the left are the percentage score that the people get right who are not going to take the vaccine. So these are people who are saying, I'm not going to take it. All the way to the dark blue are the people who are saying, yes, I am going to take it. And what you see is right across these general knowledge questions, there's a really, really strong gradient. So you find that the people who are vaccine hesitant have much poorer knowledge about how the vaccine was developed, how it works, how effective it is, how long it took, what the system was that got it there. All of the information that was in the public domain that was factual about the way the vaccine had been developed and how it worked, the people who were hesitant, they just knew far, far less. Now again, the public debate would suggest that that would be all to do with misinformation, particularly people getting misinformation online. And you can see there, questions 7, 8, 9, and I'm not going to go into the individual details here, 11 too there, were kind of misinformation questions. They were specifically bits of knowledge where there was misinformation that was going around on the internet to say, oh, in one case there, you know, the vaccine, they've put a tracking chip in it. Right, which is one of these kind of crazy rumors that was going around at the time. And sure enough, you do find that the people who are vaccine hesitant are more likely to believe this or to get a question about that wrong. But we don't find that that misinformation has any more weight than just general knowledge about the vaccine in general. All of these questions, every single one of them, what we find is that the people who are vaccine hesitant are the people who lack the basic knowledge about how the vaccine works and how it was developed. Okay. I'm going to move on. So that was a specific vaccine study that we did with these interactive computerized environments where we could relate people's understanding, what they could do, to their hesitancy. Throughout the year as well, what we've been doing as the vaccine rollout has continued is we've been tracking it on the social activity measure, and that we call SAM, which we do every 2 weeks at the Department of the Taoiseach. So that's been going from January. It's a representative sample of 1,000 online every couple of weeks. You can get the results here. They go up every Friday, every 2 weeks, every Friday. And they're all published and they're publicly available on the Department of the Taoiseach website. And when we tracked the vaccine, what we did was we looked at people who told us, yes, I've been fully vaccinated now, or I've had at least one dose of the vaccine. Those are the two green lines you can see there, with the dark green line converging as the people who'd had one dose got their second dose, and almost all of them did, as we can see. There are still a few who didn't, but almost all of them did in percentage terms anyway. And you can see there as well that among the people who'd not yet had the opportunity to get the vaccine, as we go back there, this data goes back, the first data point on the left is the end of April. What you can see there is that dashed green line is the people who are always saying, yes, when it comes to me, when I'm offered it, I'm going to get the vaccine. And you see that falls, as they do, in fact, go and get their vaccine and register on the portal and go and do it. So the solid green lines rise, the dashed green line falls, as those people are saying, yes, I'm going to get it, go and do it. But one of the really interesting things that's sitting here in this data is actually that orange line. Because that orange line is the people who, towards the start of the year, said, I'm unsure. I don't know. I might not. And one of the fascinating things about that orange line is all year we watched it fall. So it went from 9% of the population, which was substantially more than the around 5-6% who were saying definitely no. It started off, in fact in January it was more like sort of 10, 12 to 15% depending how you measured it. But if you took those unsure people, what we found was all throughout the year, the very large majority of them were actually converting to yeses. And one of the reasons Ireland actually had such a good vaccine rollout compared to other countries is our conversion of the people who are unsure at the start of the year into yeses. The red line there is the people who are the no's, and that was pretty steady. It fell marginally through the year with a bit of bumpiness here and there, as you can see. But our conversion of the people who are unsure was a really important point. Right at the start of the year, we predicted the people who were least likely to get the vaccine based on our data were people in their 30s, and it looks like that's pretty much been borne out. And we could also see that there were many people, because we measure behavior in this study as well, who were waiting to be vaccinated before they started socializing again. And that's an important kind of idea, that's an important sort of set of data to collect, because they got much reassurance, I think, from us publicizing that and saying, look, we can see that people are waiting to get vaccinated before they start taking advantage of the social opportunities that they now have. So it's good to know that you're not alone. Okay, so in this we have, because we've tracked people's behavior in terms of getting the vaccine, in this we have that data, but we also have lots and lots of other data about people, including all the socio-demographic background characteristics you'd anticipate, and this is my last slide. And I'm going to ask you a question. And the question I'm going to ask you is this: what do you think of all the background characteristics people have and all the perceptions and beliefs they might hold that we could measure was the single biggest predictor of whether they were hesitant about getting the vaccine? Now, I've asked that question to multiple audiences who can reply in real time, and when I ask that question, what they normally say is age. And it is true that age had a big effect. So we can see there that that was the situation at the start of the year when we asked people. Those are the yeses, the no's, and the not sures by age category. And you can see there is an age gradient there, and sure enough, those 30-somethings are the least likely people to take the vaccine. And actually, obviously, our vaccine rates are much higher than those grey bars in the end, because all those orange ones, or almost all of them, converted into people who took the vaccine. But age is nowhere near the biggest predictor of vaccine hesitancy. Throughout the year, by far, the biggest predictor of vaccine hesitancy has been this question: how closely have you been following the latest news coverage about COVID-19? That's a 7-point scale. It's a simple variable. We just collect it. We ask people to rate themselves from 1 to 7. How closely are you following the news about COVID-19? That is far and away the most predictive variable for whether people will take the vaccine. Now, not only was it in January 2021 that when they were saying, am I going to take the vaccine? It actually turned out to be, would they take it? So if I look at the data from August and September, where I'm now looking at people who did take the vaccine versus people who didn't, the strongest variable we have in our entire data set to predict that is that same variable. How closely have you been following the latest news coverage about COVID-19? When you put this together with our vaccine study, I think what it really tells you is that vaccine hesitancy is less driven by anti-vaccination memes on the internet and is much more driven by people who are cut off from mainstream society and don't follow the news and haven't absorbed the messages about the benefits of these vaccines, how good they are, how well they're working, and how well the system is working. These are people who are not paying attention, and they're scared of it, and they're scared of how new it is. And actually that tells us that the way we need to communicate with people about the vaccine is not just about dealing with misinformation. It's much more about getting to the hard to reach people and getting them to realize how important this weapon is and what benefits it brings. I'm slightly over time, so I'm going to skip through the summary. We have multiple measures that we take. The hesitant people are less likely to see the benefits. They see the speed of development as what frightens them more than side effects. And those hesitant people just have far, far worse knowledge. Misinformation is a problem, don't get me wrong, but failing to understand the benefits is probably bigger, and reaching those people who are the most outside of kind of the mainstream media universe in which so many of us, particularly in public life, exist, is the bigger issue. It's a disconnect that is the thing we're battling. So I hope that's interesting for you. Thank you very much, and I'm done.